You're watching the DSP Leaders Summit on the Cloud Native Telco. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content at TelecomTV. Today's panel discussion is on people and processes for a Cloud Native Telco. Now, to embrace Cloud Native will require substantial changes to a telco's internal working practices and cultures. But what is so different, and how far apart are telcos' current practices from what's needed with Cloud Native? Well, let me now introduce our guests, and I'm delighted to say that we are joined by Miguel Carames, who is Director of Network and Technology Planning at Verizon, and Ildiko Vancha, who is Ecosystem Technical Lead at the OpenStack Foundation. Ildiko and Miguel, thank you both very much for joining us. Good to see you both again.
Good to see you, Guy.
Hi, good to be here.
Now, we talk about Cloud Native requiring this change, substantial change to a telco's internal practices and cultures. But why? Ildiko, what is so different about it?
To answer the question, let me start with a short story. Before joining the OpenStack Foundation, I used to work for a telecom vendor company, and it was roughly around the time when the telcos started to go through this cloud transformation journey. So they were practically switching from a stack of specialized hardware and software towards using a cloud platform on top of kind of COTS hardware. So we realized after some time of working on a cloud platform that within the company, when we talked to people who worked on applications, they were still treating the cloud platform as the good old specialized software piece that the applications always put requirements on. So in my experience, this journey towards cloud native is really all about understanding what cloud is and also looking into the terminology that we use and make sure that we refer correctly to all the bits and pieces and remove all the perceptions that we might have and be flexible.
Great. And Miguel, you're working from within a telco. You're seeing this firsthand. So really, what is different about Cloud Native and its impact on cultures and practices? And Miguel, you're seeing this from firsthand. You're within a telco. You're seeing this yourself. But really, what's so different about Cloud Native that requires these substantial changes to the way a telco works and operates?
Yeah, so Ildiko put it nicely. As MNOs, we've basically gone through a paradigm shift. We've gone from integrating boxes, like turnkey solutions delivered by a vendor that was all-inclusive, right? Hardware, OS, and applications, to having to be more aware of how the systems are decomposed. And so now we have applications that are running on top of our telco cloud, and all levels of the organization need to be aware of how things work in a deeper sense, right? So from a planning to engineering and operations perspective, we are all more aware of how the software interoperates with our cloud platform, how the cloud platform interoperates with the hardware, and how it all comes together. And so this is a journey for MNOs. It's a different way of running the network compared to what we've done for the last 10, 15 years.
So as you say, the industry is learning to understand and become aware of what's needed. But how far apart are telcos on average from the practices that are required with Cloud Native?
So I think because we are still in the infancy, you have completely different approaches being followed by different telcos or MNOs around the world. You have like larger, usually more forward-looking early adopters, tier ones, where we've decided to build our own telco cloud, get the application vendors to drop their applications on top, and we have strong guidelines and requirements as to how those applications interface with our cloud. Then you have, on the other extreme, you'll have some MNOs that have decided that maybe they weren't ready for that shift, or they didn't have the personnel or the capital, or they just didn't think the market was mature enough, and they've gone with another approach in which the application vendor brings the cloud stack as well. So maybe they've standardized the hardware, but they still get a turnkey vertically integrated cloud and application stack from each of their vendors. And then you have everything in between, and then increasingly more news and they are popping up on the possibility of using public cloud as well. So it's kind of hard to include all the operators in one bucket. I think we are at different parts of the evolution.
And Ildiko, from your perspective, you see across the whole ecosystem. So are you seeing different states of readiness and preparedness?
Yes and no, in the sense of, I think first, before I go into detail on that one, I would just mention that I've seen it in many places that sometimes people, I think, confuse cloud native, the concept, with some technologies like containers. And I would really emphasize on that cloud native is a concept and cloud native is a set of principles. And what I started to see, for instance, in the open source ecosystem is that cloud operators, as Miguel said, tier ones, but some others as well, are coming together in these environments and starting to talk about what a cloud platform is, what their requirements are from a cloud platform, and just really working together on both understanding of what they need and what they want, as well as working with the vendor ecosystem on both when it comes to delivering that cloud platform and also on the side of the applications that will run on top. And I think when we talk about the cloud native principles, that's especially applicable to the applications. When the cloud transformation started, there wasn't really a chance to rewrite existing applications, but with 5G coming in, there's now a chance to design applications from scratch with these principles in mind. So in that sense, I think we as an industry are getting much closer.
And as you say, it's so important to separate the individual technologies from the overall methodologies involved with cloud native. But Ildiko, do you think that telcos, do they need to re-engineer like entire workforces, or is it sufficient for them to focus on specific teams and specific projects?
I think it's rather a journey and transformation and kind of an ongoing change as always, because we always are going through some sort of a change almost everywhere. So I think that I mentioned open source, that requires some changes with how teams are operating, but it's not necessarily a fundamental redesign and just creating it from scratch. I think it can be part of a journey and just really making sure that people get the chance to participate and just build, for instance, that interaction into their daily work lives. The other thing that I started to recognize is that there are a lot of efforts are going into automation when it comes to the day two operations. So I think that's also probably part of this journey as well, that people are working on designing and implementing these tools that will help them on that side, which will then enable them to structure the workforces differently and again, work on how the teams are interacting with each other as well as with other organizations in the open source ecosystem.
And Miguel, what's your thinking here? Do telcos need to re-engineer their entire workforces or focus on specific teams doing specific projects?
I think this shift to cloud nativeness ends up trickling down through the entire workforce. I don't know that I would say necessarily it's a re-engineering. It's something that happens progressively, right, over time. Teams will start realizing that they are able to do things that they couldn't do before. And the point that Ildiko raised is a good one, right? So automation is ever more critical, right? Like everybody has more things to do. We all have more technology rolled in the network than ever before. You have multiple Gs coexisting. You have the shift to IMS and VoLTE. You have 5G. You have IoT picking up. And so more things to do, same amount of people or less people. So more need for creative automation and orchestration. And so it's a shift that happens out of necessity. And then because teams get familiar with the tool set, and then they find ways to use it, right? And automation is a big one. Being more data-driven is another one. And I think it happens in a more organic fashion, if you would.
Well, let's look at people in more detail. it's a trend we've been seeing for a long time. It's a downsizing of the workforce. We're never going to vastly increase the number of employees we have. It's always going in one direction. We've seen telcos lay off or make redundant people associated with certain technologies. As technologies get sunsetted, I guess, and the new technologies come on, there's always going to be this change. But there's that need to learn new skills. Miguel, do you think this trend to perhaps lay off those people associated with older technologies and look at reskilling, is this an inevitable trend across the industry?
I'm going to hope it isn't. I do think, like Ildiko said before, change is inevitable. Technology is moving faster than ever before. So we do have a workforce that has to be constantly learning. The time between technology shifts is shortening, right? So it's a constant learning that we are all going through. Again, it's at all levels. It's from operations to engineering to planning to even the teams that actually bring the products to market. So I think it doesn't have to involve layoffs. It does involve talent transformation and reskilling and upskilling the teams that we have. Because the reality is, even through automation, there is a lot of work to do in the network. There are things that still cannot be very well automated today, where human skills are required. So it's a matter of automating what's low value and then using the human brain where it's required.
Ildiko, are you seeing telcos and the wider ecosystem reskilling people? Are you seeing people coming who have been working in other parts of the CSP, learning these new skills and applying them within cloud native areas?
In some extent, yes. Of course, I'm looking at it from a different perspective, so I don't have as much insights. But when it comes to these open source ecosystems, I see people moving around, both between technologies and every now and then between companies as well. I've seen that more on the enterprise side, but I somewhat started to see that maybe with telcos too. I think I would highlight here what Miguel was saying, that this is a transition and we need to also help people to be able to adapt to changes faster. I think open source environments are really good places to help people go through that, because within these groups and open source communities, you pick up a lot of skills and you have a lot of people to learn from. So it's usually, in my experience, much easier to go through these changes, because you have so many people to ask questions from and share experiences with, that it's kind of a learning lesson in itself, and it doesn't come in a pre-packaged training course, but it's something that you kind of learn by example and by practicing. And I think it's a huge advantage compared to the times before telcos were joining the open source way of working.
Well, as you say, Ildiko, we do have these groups where individuals can come together and learn as well as share their experiences. Hopefully we can be able to do that physically soon rather than purely virtually, but these forums do exist. So that's one area where new skills are coming from. What about other areas? What about when telcos have to look outside and bring in new skills? It's a very competitive marketplace. I would say telcos perhaps aren't people's first choice of employment for the highly skilled. There are the hyperscalers. There are more, I guess, attractive companies especially for graduates. But are skills transferable from sector to sector? Can telcos look to other enterprise verticals? Are skills applicable in the cloud native world?
I think we are getting to that point. Like Miguel was mentioning, public clouds. And I think as telcos are progressing with automation, for instance, and being able to pick up more practices like DevOps, for instance, because that's really popular these days, to mention one. So once, as they are going through that transformation and are able to become more flexible with their processes and workflows, I think we will also be getting much closer in skill set to be more appealing to any generational workforce. On the other hand, with this automation and transformation, I think inner source is also something that maybe some telcos already started to do, or that can be a path forward in case of some of the teams. Inner source meaning starting to use the some tools and processes that you see open source communities use to collaborate and work together on software documentation, testing, and all these kind of activities that they do. Practically, it has a lot of advantage. On one hand, it's much easier for people within the corporate organization to join an open source community when they learn the tools or some of them before they join. And on the other hand, these practices are tested by thousands, well, millions of people every day to work together on different things. So it's definitely, I think, should be part of the telco journey as well.
Great. And Miguel, what do you think? Where are these new skills coming from?
So it is a very competitive market out there, right? So it's is the hyperscalers, is the technology vendors, is the startups, is the application vendors. I think the skills, some, as Ildiko pointed out before, have to come from within. And we, at times, we need to get past these hiring people that already know everything and rather train the people that have the desire to learn new things, right? This can be learned just like any other skill, and that's important. And then the other thing that I would say for us telcos is, and we at Verizon have been working on this, but we have to kind of communicate to the world what we do, right? Like we have a big internship program. We have kids that come over when they're in college, even early internships when they are in high school. And it's all about them putting to use the skills that they have, but also them getting awareness of the things they can do in a telco like Verizon. And sometimes they are surprised, right? Like you get the feedback like, oh, I didn't know that you guys do this too, right? Like the innovation that we're doing as it relates to bringing, for example, touching different verticals on the enterprise space, right? So, and kids get very excited about it because things that they relate to AR, VR, and so on. And so I think that has to be part of our outreach as well, so that this talent that's out there, because we do want that talent as well. It cannot be all just recycled from within. Sees the telcos as places where they can develop their skills and they can have a really strong career as well, and they can make a difference. And so I think that's an area where we maybe in the past we lack some behind, like the Googles and so on, and we need to keep working on it, and we need to do better.
Yeah, great points. I think the industry as a whole can do more to sort of outreach and explain just how exciting telecoms is becoming, because it really is. That's people. The other side of the coin here is processes. We've got processes. Ildiko's mentioned DevOps earlier. We've got CI/CD. Miguel, do telcos, by and large, do they understand these new cloud native processes and why they are important?
Yes, I think we understand, and we've gone through our own DevOps journey, and we are using CI/CD. It's a little counter to the nature of the telco, how we run the networks in the past, right? So by definition, telcos, we are very process-oriented. We've had this culture of change controls, and things get done at night, and only this many things can be done, and there is a huge amount of pre- and post-test, and there is the rolling back if anything looks like it might not have gone right. And it's all for a good reason, right? We are heavily scrutinized. If you make a phone call and it doesn't connect, you call your operator and you complain about it. If you try to buy something on, say, Amazon, and the first time you click, it doesn't go through, well, you retry and that's fine. Right? It's a different expectations that we have compared to some of partners and competitors. But at the same time, we've come to realize that because these networks are so dynamic, and there are so many things, so many changes we're introducing into the network every day, there is no way that we can do all that 100% within the old framework, right? So CI/CD is definitely part of the way we run networks today. DevOps is a big, big part of the way we we develop the skills and the way we run the network as well, right? So the folks that are running the network, they actually do understand how the applications work. And for the most part, they are either involved in the development of their own tools or they are very, very experienced users of those tools.
Great. And Ildiko, what do you see? Do you see telcos as understanding DevOps and CI/CD and why it's important and able to implement?
Similarly to a previous question, I don't have the very insider view anymore, but with all the other things that I saw in the collaboration on the cloud native principles and understanding how the different kinds of new technologies work, I think that's also true for the processes themselves, as Miguel has said, that they are going through the journey of creating their own DevOps workflows and working with CI/CD as well. So I think telcos are definitely taking a lot of steps. But when it comes to the other side of telecommunication with the SLAs and the 5 nines, I think there's also kind of a bigger responsibility in terms of keeping the network, the backbone network operational compared to a web service. Because if I cannot buy my favorite new shoes immediately, then I will survive. But for instance, recently where I live, we had some outages at times of big storms. So I did not have any sort of mobile connection. And if something would have happened that time, I cannot call an ambulance, which is a huge problem. So I think in that sense, we also need to be patient and make sure that we don't apply a process just because this is a popular new process, but because it will help for the telcos and the operators to provide the same level of service as before with their traditional workflows.
Well, Ildiko, we've focused on telcos themselves, but what about the wider ecosystem? What about their partners and suppliers? How does cloud native impact the vendor ecosystem?
I think the vendor ecosystem is getting impacted in multiple ways. One is we talked about automation and the need for automation. So there are some tools that are missing that are getting designed and developed as we speak. So that is one area. The other area I think, which is really important, is the applications. Because with 5G being here, there are a lot of new applications that will be implemented or are getting implemented already. And this has to happen with the cloud native mindset and the principles in mind as well. And in terms of the whole wide ecosystem, the operators and vendors need to be able to work much closer with each other as before. So I think the third angle is the standardization, because that also started to happen a little differently from how it was get done in the past. So there are some bits and pieces starting to happen in these open environments and these open ecosystems. And operators are, for instance, talking about how a cloud platform should look like. And that means practically defining the interfaces, which also are very important from application perspective, because interoperability is always a huge challenge, especially in multi-vendor environments. So I think from this perspective, working together, understanding together what cloud native means, that involves this whole wide ecosystem, including both operators as well as vendors.
It's all part of this journey. We keep mentioning this journey, but it is, isn't it? It's an ongoing journey. Miguel, how do you see cloud native affecting the wider vendor ecosystem?
Yeah, so I would summarize it with 2 words, right? So it's partnership on one hand and then trust on the other one. So we, in partnership is very important. So in the old days, the relationships were very clear. I was an MNO and I was buying a turnkey solution from vendor A, and they were delivering everything, right? There was a piece of hardware that would run the applications, we would test it, we would accept it, and we would deploy it. That solution in itself had many components provided by third parties oftentimes, but the integration and then the challenges to put it together were handled by the vendor behind closed doors, if you got, right? So not in the face of the customer. I could be facing the vendor, and they would take care of their third-party vendors that were part of the solution. In this new environment with NFV and then eventually Cloud Native and web scale, that's no longer the case. Everything is happening in the open, right? Like we provide the hardware. We have our telco cloud, which has multiple vendors or open source tools that are part of the stack. And then the application vendor delivers their application, and we integrate it. And when things do break, and things always do break, it's all in the open, right? We get to see more than before. And at times there can be some finger pointing and loss of efficiency and performance, which translates into dollars for us MNOs. And so we need this partnership in which what matters really is for the solution to work, to deliver the best value for the end customer, to make sure that we find the right solution instead of vendor A or vendor B or MNO being right. It really doesn't matter, but we need to find the right solution, the optimal architecture for the end customer. And then that requires a lot of trust, right? Which is my other point. If you look at the new relationships, we MNOs are vendors to our application vendors because we provide the platform. So they are riding our platform. So we have to be really clear in communicating how our cloud operates, what tools and interfaces are there. And I like the point that Ildiko made around standardizing, right? So these APIs and points of integration have to be very clearly defined so the application can take a full advantage of it. And so this partnership and trust is very important because obviously we are all trying to accomplish multiple goals that at times are conflicting, right? For us, it's very important that we provide more flexibility, bring solutions to market faster, but it's also very important that we optimize the price point, which is why we've embraced cloud in the first place. So we'll put some requirements, strong requirements in the application to make sure that they take full advantage of our cloud platform that we use. We define the right KPIs and we make sure that we get the optimal result for these KPIs. This many gigabit per second per vCPU. I understand from the vendor perspective, their concern is, I'm not in full control, right? Like I don't own the platform, I don't own the hardware, yet I need to make sure that my application is optimized for that. And that cannot happen without the partnership.
I'd like to conclude this panel. I'd like to ask each of you for a brief conclusion. Ildiko, I'm going to ask you first, because at last year's Cloud Native Telco event, this was identified, people and processes, as the most important aspect of Cloud Native facing telcos. Is it still the case? And if so, what can we do briefly as an industry to help address it?
I think it still is. And I think in some extent, it always will be. We talked about the constant change, and we have 5G now, but the year will come when it will turn into 6G or whatever we call it at that time. So I think reflecting back to Miguel's point in his last answer, partnership is really important, and working together and just constantly evolving and also adopting, and just don't be afraid of change.
Great. And Miguel, final comment from you. What can we do as an industry to help accelerate cloud native in telcos?
Yeah, so I think this concept of open sourcing and sharing best practices is very important, right? We will not succeed. We are all like kind of wall garden, right, and protecting our IP. There are many things that we can learn from each other. And so I think that's a critical message for us telcos, right? We got to learn from each other. We at times I think we have a tendency to be dismissive of the smaller players or the greenfields. The reality is they are doing a lot of things in a more creative, maybe being more aggressive as they roll technology, and we can learn from them. at the same time, they can learn from the more established MNOs on things that we've tried and didn't work. So I like that concept of applying the open source principles, right, and contributing and sharing and making it available for the better of the community. I think that'll be critical for to solve this problem and do better.
Excellent. Well, that's all the time we have, unfortunately. For now, thank you both very much indeed for joining us. Really appreciate your time and sharing your views with us. A reminder that we have many more interviews, panel discussions, and analysis programs as part of the Cloud Native Telco Summit. They are all here to view on TelecomTV. And if you're watching us live, then please stay with us and join our live Q&A program. If you have questions for any of our guests, then do get in touch with us now via the TelecomTV site. But for now, thank you for watching, and we hope to see you again very soon.